Hey guys, welcome back. So today we're working on this 3500 watt Generac. This one I found on Facebook Marketplace. The person selling it was only asking $25. The listing didn't say what was wrong with it, and I didn't ask. For $25, it doesn't matter if it runs or not. In parts alone, it's worth quite a bit more. Of course, my hope is that it does run and make power. So that's what we're going to find out today. Now, assuming that this works, there are a number of issues I can see already we need to deal with. This wheel here is barely hanging on, needs to be replaced. Starter recoil rope not in great shape, and looks like it's ready to break. And unfortunately, the airbox is broken or cut, at least the front cover. And this part here sells for about $50. And that was a couple years ago. I actually think it's discontinued. So locating a new one could be a problem. The choke lever is missing, which could be maybe why this was sold. I don't think you could start it without the choke. And although we're missing paint, we're not really rusted. And the chrome is in really good shape. So I think this was stored indoors. And this is one of the rare portable generators that actually has an oil filter and an oil pressure sensor. So, this engine is really well built. This machine is actually really well built. So definitely worth saving if at all possible. So let me get set up a little bit better and get going on this. All right, let's check the oil real quick, make sure we have some. And it is low. It should be filled up right to the last thread. And I do see some down there, but it is low. So I'm going to top that off, and then we can move on. That should be good enough. I added about 200 milliliters of oil. Just going to get a look at the air filter and actually remove it for now, because without a choke, we're going to have to spray a bit of starting fluid in there. Interesting. Those are the missing bits for the air filter, which looks like it was cut with a saw. So I'm not sure what the story is on that. But thankfully the airbox base is in pretty good shape. So the carburetor is down there, at least the air intake for it. And the governor linkage, it's completely hidden by everything. But if I reach in there, I can close that throttle plate. So it's not stuck, which is a good sign. So I'm going to pull the fuel line off up here. We'll add a bit of fuel and pull it over. See if we get any signs of life. All right, let's see if it takes any fuel. Yeah, definitely taking fuel. So that's a good sign. Maybe, just maybe, it'll start. We're flooding over. Yeah, it looks like I spoke too soon. The needle is not even trying to stop the flow of fuel, so I would say that is completely stuck. That said, though, the bowl, it is full of fuel, so I say we give it a few pulls and see what we get. All right, let's give this a try. I've got a light plugged in and turned on. The ignition is turned on. Of course, we have plenty of fuel. And the choke, I'm not sure if it's on or off. The lever is missing. So let's pull it a few times. I'm not sure how many we're going to get with this cord. Hopefully we don't need too many. Wow, that is a short cord. All right, let's try a bit of starting fluid. I can see the cord is fraying more with every pull, so don't have too many more pulls left. Yeah, we get no signs of life. Yeah, we got nothing from this engine, so potentially we have a spark issue. We really should have got something out of this engine, but the cord, it is just so short. You know, I can't really get a good pull on it. So I'm going to get a longer rope in there first. We'll pull it over a few more times, and if we still get nothing, we'll check the spark and the compression. Definitely have compression. So I don't think that's the issue. All right, you can see not a lot left to this pull cord and very short. You know, the total length, it's about 3 feet. Should be about twice that. And I actually think we're tangled internally because when I pull this out all the way, it should keep going, you know, until that knot aligns with that hole. And instead we're just hung up. So I think it's hanging up on kind of all that junk in there. So we might have to cut it short on the outside and then just pull it through to get the rest out. Okay. So we'll cut off that knot. And then wind it up. Just put the screwdriver in there to keep this from unwinding. We'll put a knot in the line and then just let the spring pull the cord in. All right, so this cord actually made it a little bit too long. It's probably a good, I would say 8 feet. And we don't need it that long. Plus the spring tension's getting kind of weak right here. So I'm going to cut it a little bit shorter. Going to melt the ends to keep it from fraying, but it also makes it easier to feed through this hole right here. All right, let's try that out. And there's actually supposed to be a fourth bolt, which was missing. So I'm going to use this one. It's a little bit longer. So you have to be careful because these bolts, if they're too long, they actually hit the flywheel and can break the fins. So once we get this installed, just pull the engine over real slowly. Make sure this is not creating any interference. Perfect. All right, let's try this again. We're still in the run position. Give it a bit of starting fluid. Well, the choke might be on, so if it is, adding the starting fluid there isn't going to help. Let's see if we can get this to start. Still nothing. Yeah, we should have got something. So either the fuel isn't making it past the choke, which might be closed, or we're not sparking. So we'll get the plug out, take a look at that, and we'll check it for spark. Yeah, spark plug looks good. You know, I'd say the engine was running pretty well when it was running. The plug itself is an NGK BKR5ES. So let's check it real quick for spark. All right, keep an eye on that right there. Yeah, good strong blue spark. So spark is not the issue. So spark's not the issue. The plug's actually pretty dry, so I don't think fuel is actually making it either through the jetting in the carb or even the stuff I spray in there isn't making it into the intake manifold. Likely that choke plate might be closed. So I'm going to put a little bit of fuel directly in there, and hopefully that'll do it. All right, this time it should do something. Oh. Okay, I'll take it. That was quite a smoke show. You know, my hope is that'll burn off if we can get the engine to run a little bit longer. You know, I guess on the good news side, the engine sounds good, although it didn't really get up to speed. And the generator is working. That light turned on. So everything critical here is working, you know, except the carburetor. It's not really doing carburetor things. So we need to get it off, get it cleaned up. We'll bolt it back on the machine and hopefully get it running longer. You know, with any luck, that's just some oil in the exhaust that will burn off after a few minutes of runtime. So let's get the carb off. All right, let's see what we have to work with here. So we know the needle is stuck. Carb isn't really running the engine either. The bolt actually doesn't look bad. It's not rusty. And the inside of the bowl actually looks pretty good. There is a little bit of water down there, but not really enough to prevent this from running. And the inside also looks pretty good. So we'll get the float off with the needle. Needle actually looks good, so I'm a little surprised it wasn't working. You know, potentially it freed itself up once the engine ran, so it might not need too much attention. Main jet is on the floor. Surprisingly, the main jet is not clogged. And it looks like that's it. There is nothing else that comes off of this carburetor. So I was actually expecting a lot worse, given that, you know, the engine wasn't running on the carburetor. And actually, this is the issue here with the choke. So the choke isn't broken. It's just the lever that's broken. And unfortunately, the lever itself is not separate from the shaft. So if we wanted to reuse this carburetor, we would have to pull this plate out and then replace the shaft. So, you know, this carb might be a clone. Actually, no, it's an OEM Nicky. So I know I have other Nicky carbs for this type of generator. You know, I think those carbs have issues, but I'm pretty sure we have the right choke lever. So let me just double check what I have. So this is the other carb I was thinking about. You know, this one was in a bin because it does have run issues, but it is an OEM Nicky, and it has the missing lever. So let's move that over. You know, we'll try to clean this up, get that one running correctly. If we can't get it running right, you know, we at least have a plan B. All right, perfect. One problem solved. So I'm just going to go through these passages. We'll let this soak for a little bit in the ultrasonic, and then we'll give this another try. Actually, we have a problem here with the main jet. If you remember, when the engine did start, it was running slow and quite rich and very smoky. I think I found out why. The main jet, although it's not plugged, it's actually missing all of its threads. And when I unscrewed it, it came out pretty loose, you know, like it wasn't tight, but it was actually already broken inside this carb body. So what happened, I think, was that, you know, the fuel was just getting past here unmetered and flooding out the engine. And that's why it ran so poorly. So the other carburetor, it does have a good jet. You know, we can move it over. You know, of course, we need to get out what remains from here. So let me try an easy out, see if we can save this carb. Well, somebody forgot to hit record, but you didn't miss much. I just used the easy out to spin out that piece of the jet that was in there. You know, thankfully it wasn't stuck in the threads. It just spun right out, then fell on the floor and is hopelessly lost, but that doesn't matter because that was junk anyway. So let's get the good jet out of this carburetor. we'll just loosely spin it into the other, make sure that, it tightens up and that we don't have any thread damage. Yeah, that thread's in there perfectly. Snugged right up. So I think we're back in business. I've been looking at these parts pretty closely, trying to figure out why this was leaking. The seat looks to be in very good condition, and the tip of the needle also no issue. But if you look at the side of the needle, there is a ton of buildup, and it's actually a very tight tolerance between this needle and the bore that it drops into. So thinking that just caused the needle to stick. And once we added fuel and got the engine running, it kind of broke it free. But I would like to spend a second and just try to clean that off so that we don't have a repeat incident. So to do that, you don't want to use carb cleaner because that will damage the neoprene rubber on the tip, but you can use WD-40. It's not going to cause any harm. So, put a little bit of that on. We can use, a bit of Scotch-Brite to try to get that off. And if that doesn't work, we can actually just use a little wire wheel from the Dremel, which I think I'm going to do anyway, because it should make quick work of it. Yeah, that should do. And now it finally shows up. The little piece of the jet that I thought I dropped on the floor was actually right there the whole time, hiding somehow under that bowl. It cleaned up really well. Almost looks like new. So this should run pretty well. Now that we have a jet that's not broken and a needle that's not stuck, this has a really good chance of running the engine properly. So we'll cross our fingers. I guess we'll find out in a minute how we made out. All right, let's try it out. So putting this back together, it can certainly be tricky. There's not a separate hole for the anti-surge spring, so you have to put that in first, and then the governor rod. And on a lot of small engines, you would then secure the carb to the intake manifold, but not this one. It's actually two long bolts that come in through the airbox, so you have to align everything perfectly while holding the airbox, getting the airbox on the breather, and you actually have to connect the fuel line right now. It routes in back of the airbox, kind of in this direction, so you have to line everything up just right before you can tighten down and secure things. Just 40 inch-pounds on these. I don't think there's any metal bushings on this plastic, so it can break pretty easily. Okay, good. Looks like we are full right to there, and the needle's holding. So let's try to start it. That was a pretty big difference. This time it started right up with the choke off. You know, likely there was still some fuel in the cylinder from the last time we ran it with the broken jet. You know, but this time the engine got right up to speed. There was a little smoke, but nothing like before. And it was burning off as the engine warmed up. So I think we're okay as far as the smoking issue goes. You know, this also was running a bit slow. It was at 55 Hertz. The voltage was also low at 114. So we do need to make some adjustments to the engine speed. You know, that adjustment is right there. And this actually has an AVR. There's a potentiometer in there. So we don't want to adjust that until we've got the engine speed squared away. And actually, I don't want to adjust either until I can bring this outside and run it a bit longer. So, you know, I think we're at the point where this has earned an oil change, but I don't have the oil filter. So I'm actually gonna place an order. You know, we'll get a new filter, a new set of wheels, a new air filter, and we also need the airbox cover. You know, I took a look online. It is still available. The price has gone up a little to $55, but at least you can get one if you need one. You know, in my case, I have another Generac engine in storage. It's actually twice as big as this machine, but I think it uses the same air filter and likely the same airbox cover. So I'm going to pause it here, get some parts ordered, maybe make a trip to the storage locker and confirm that we have the cover we need, and then we can finish putting this together and get it outside for some load tests. All right, it's been a few days, and the parts, they have arrived that we need to finish this up. Starting with these. These are 8-inch wheels from Amazon. You know, the set was $28 and should be more or less perfect for this machine. The OEM ones, they were still available, but they were $80 each. So yeah, that's not an option. I'm sure these are going to be just fine. You know, I also have a grip for the handle. This actually I didn't buy. It came from a toy that my kids outgrew. So this will get repurposed for this generator. We also have a new air filter, new oil filter, and unfortunately, the Generac engine and storage. That came from that beacon generator I worked on a year or so ago. That was the one that kept catching on fire. And that was the airbox I was thinking of, but I took a quick look at the video, and that airbox is completely different. So for now, this is all we have. So I'm going to reinstall it, and it still holds the filter. So technically, it's still doing its job, but ideally, it should be replaced. So I might order a new one of these. Potentially, I might 3D print one. I guess it depends on how much time I have to design one of these in Fusion 360. But for now, let's get these parts installed. Yeah, that pin's going to be a problem because of the way this is designed. So I do have some push nuts I can use instead, which I kind of hate to do, but I think in this case, that's the way to go. Perfect. That's just a thicker spacer. So I want to have this a pretty tight fit so those ball bearings can't fall out of the hub. Yeah, so hopefully I can come up with something for this using the 3D printer. Now I do own two 3D printers. I think the issue is they belong to my sons. They are somewhat familiar with Fusion 360, and I actually have only designed one part in Fusion 360. And my son had to finish it because I got stuck. So maybe I'll just have him design this part. Or maybe it's time that Dad learns how to use it. Before I change that oil, I'm going to get the engine started again, let it run for a minute or two, just long enough to get things mixed up, get some heat into that oil, so that way we get a better flush when we drain it out. So, this time when it's running, I am going to try to adjust the speed. We should have enough time to do that, at least get it closer to where it should be. And then once we've got that, we will shut it down and get that oil changed. I think we got things dialed in pretty close. I actually made two adjustments here. The first one was the no load speed, and I brought that up just over 61.5 hertz. And the voltage came up as well. It was actually 121 volts. So on the surface, it seems pretty good. But on this machine, I think the no load voltage should be closer to 125 volts. So, I guess we'll see when we load test it how the voltage does. But likely we are going to have to bring that up a little bit more using that potentiometer. The second adjustment I made was the idle speed. I turned the idle control to on. I took the load off, and the engine slowed down like it should, but it slowed down a bit too much. These should idle around 45 to 50 hertz, and if it's any lower, the generator's going to stop making power, and that's what we saw. So I brought that idle speed up closer to 50 hertz. The generator started making power and acting like it should. So I think we're pretty good. We might need to fine tune this a bit, but for now, let's get that oil changed. Wow. It was on there pretty loose. Yeah, the oil that came out, it's well-used oil, but it doesn't look that bad. There's no metallic in the oil, no water, don't smell any fuel. So that is a good sign. So, at this point, there's not a whole lot left. We still need to deal with the cover, but before we do that, I think I want to deal with the tank. There is something in the tank. It actually doesn't have much of a smell, so I'm not sure if it's fuel, water, or maybe both, but I think we need to get it out of there. So I'm going to get the bolts out of the tank, we'll get the tank removed, and we'll drain it out. I think while we're at it, we're going to get this bushing replaced. That's a common point of failure, and although this one looks pretty good, like I don't see any cracking, it is very petrified, and looks like someone put JB Weld here as well, so that is not a good sign. So let's get the tank off and see what's going on with this bushing. I'm kind of surprised. The JB Weld, I half expected it to be coating this entire surface. Instead, it's just kind of going around the edge. So I'm not sure if this is a repair or maybe someone's previous attempt to stop an older bushing from leaking, because this tank, it has something in it, some sort of liquid, and it wasn't leaking. So I think we're going to be okay. So let's get this old bushing out, swap it with a new. All right, let's see what's in here. That looks like water. Although the consistency is off. I'm not really sure what that is. Yeah, this one might be a first. This stuff here, it looks a lot like water, but it's absolutely not water. It's actually very oily. You know, it's not diesel, definitely not gasoline. I think it might be kerosene. And this stuff here on the very bottom, that's water. So, yeah, this generator, it really had no chance between the wrong fuel in the tank, the cracked jet, and that super short starter recoil cord. You know, the prior owner really had zero chance of getting this thing running. Anyway, let's get this out of the way and finish up that tank. So the tank, it is drained fully of the kerosene and the water, but there is an oily residue inside the tank and pretty much everywhere at this point. So I'm going to try to mop out what I can. You know, kerosene and gasoline, they do mix. So, you know, even if there's some residue in there, I don't think there's enough that we're going to see any kind of a run issue. All right, so much for mopping. My tool, it broke. So I'm going to use one of these bushings here. They are made by HIPAA, and they're fairly standard on generator tanks and actually any tank that's plastic. So these, they sell them on Amazon. Actually, this particular batch was sent to me by a subscriber, John, who had a bunch of extra. So thank you, John, for that. So to get it installed, just put the bushing in without the valve. And then you're going to need a little bit of oil or soap to assist in pushing this valve in place. And there we go. Just get this filter swapped out too while we're here. Maybe. Yeah, I wonder if that's why it smoked. You know, the jet was broken. But I've got to imagine, you know, someone was trying to start it with the kerosene in there. And it was probably quite flooded with it. So, yeah, that may have been the source of the smoke. All right, so far so good. The bushing is nice and dry. Let's test the valve real quick. Make sure we have good fuel flow. Yeah, plenty of fuel flow. So, no issues with that valve. Well, I think we're pretty much ready to go. I've got 3,000 watts of load on standby. But before we can put this to the test, we do need to get the airbox cover back on. You know, this was the one that came with the machine that was damaged at the top. And this one right here, actually my 15-year-old son designed and printed using his 3D printer. This should do the job quite well. So let's get that installed, and then we'll put it to the test. All right, started without issue. Sine wave doesn't look too bad. And the THD, we're actually starting pretty low at about 6% total harmonic distortion. So we'll give it a few minutes and then we'll bring on the load. No issues handling the 1500 watts. The sine wave cleaned up a bit, and the THD still isn't that bad. It's at 12.3% THD. So yeah, not a low THD machine, but it's doing better than most. So we'll give that a few minutes, and then we'll double the load to 3000 watts. That's handling the 3000 watts without issue. Technically we're at 3100 watts with that light, and its max rated is 3500, so we are pretty close to the max. Let's take a look at the sine wave. Looks about the same. And the THD, we're at 16% THD. No issues to report. Started right up. Engine sounds great. And it had no problems pulling 3100 watts. So overall, this didn't need a whole lot. And I think its biggest problem was the broken main jet. And like that, it was overfueling the engine, making it difficult to start. And of course, once we did get it started, it smoked like crazy. So we got that issue sorted, as well as a bunch of other issues. And now this thing is 100%. As far as the cover goes, I am very happy about that. It took a lot of effort on my son's part to get that designed. He's printed quite a few things with his printer, but most of that was downloaded. Someone else had designed it. He has designed parts before, but nothing as complicated as this. So he also learned quite a bit. And now we can print a cover anytime we need it. So, I hope this video helps someone. Thanks for watching.